he'd also let slip that he'd been working at a caravan site called Meadowlands. And for some reason or another, he needed to find another place. So Meadowlands. So this was interesting because I'm in touch with Parents Against Grooming in Barrow. And we know that the grooming gang work out of Meadowlands caravan site as well. And this got me interested in the connections between the grooming gangs and the taxi and private hire groups. Also, the fostering companies that are being set up and down the country, unregulated. And there's links to the Asian grooming gangs and the Asian fostering companies and the voluntary adoption agencies, because this gentleman was actually working for a research hospital in Qatar as a social worker.
Right.
And yeah, it's a genomics hospital, specialises in genomics. At the same time, he was working for Caritas Care Limited, which is a voluntary adoption agency. And so
just to clarify on that one, there's a guy who's working for an adoption agency, but is also connected with big money Middle Eastern financial situation. When you mentioned this with Simon, the phrase that popped into my head was organ trafficking. Off the top of my head, that sounded very much.
Yeah, well, it's genomics, so I suppose it's the largest research hospital in Qatar. It was built by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Here we go.
And it is also run. The chief executive is Lord Darcy, who signs your COVID letters, at the bottom. He's the chief executive of that. I don't know if he still is. I don't know. But this was like 2 years ago. I haven't checked recently what he's up to now. But yeah, obvious links. And I did contact both of his employments to confirm that he was still working for them. And he was working for both at the same time.
As a senior regional
project
manager.
So,
A note I've got here is senior regional government officer. Is that connected with this situation?
Well, what I started to do was to have a look at the setting up of the regional adoption agencies, which came into force about, it was after 2008. They started telling the councils that, with big monetary incentives to do this, is to come together with other councils in the areas. So ours is Durham. I think it's West Yorkshire, Cumbria, and to become one huge adoption agency. So when I started looking at the minutes of the meetings, in the council meetings, there was one name that kept popping up at the bottom of every council meeting minutes, online. You could find it all online. And it was a gentleman called Sandip Mahajan. And
the spelling of that name's important. I remember you chatting with Simon.
Oh, yes, it's not double EP on the end, it's DIP, because he's changed his name. And when I told my MP, I questioned my MP as to why this man would have been needed at the top of the regional adoption agency, because I presumed they would put somebody at the top of an adoption agency that had been working, in a capacity in a council, or as a head of an adoption agency.
Right, had some qualifications and experience.
So, yes, I just thought no experience there, And what rang alarm bells was that in South Cumbria, where I live, we're South Lakes District Council. I've never, ever, ever seen a foreign name on our council, because they're quite Freemasonry,
right.
if I can say that.
Sure.
And so that sort of, I was like, oh my goodness, who's this, So I had to look at him, and he was actually working as a scrutiny officer, first and foremost. He was a scrutiny officer in South Lakes District Council, in Scarborough Council, and in Blackpool Council. And I thought, well, why is this man going around north of England being a scrutiny officer in different councils?
What does that mean, a scrutiny officer? Scrutinising what?
Oh, they scrutinise the policies of the councils. Okay. So they have a scrutiny committee. So they put forward policies or officers, or and then they have a scrutiny committee, which is normal. They've just got to check that the money's being spent properly and they're doing the right thing in the council.
Right. So superficially, on the surface of it, it looks like that there's accountability.
The councillors, scrutiny officer. Yeah. So anyway, so I sort of looked him up and realised that this gentleman was a director of many, many, many companies. And most worryingly, it was Steinhoff, which is a South African company, and they have got links with the Panama Papers. There's a few very dodgy characters in Steinhoff. They've had a big scandal recently.
Can you give us a quick summary of the Panama Papers? How does that tie in?
Oh, well, that's the offshore banking system where people go and hide their money.
So big money.
Big money.
Billion-dollar industry stuff.
And we're talking about big industries, not little little places, because I know that small companies can go and put their money, but these are major players that we're talking about. Steinhoff is the largest mover of furniture globally in the world and the largest producer of furniture. So if you look at any of your furniture manufacturers here in England or anywhere, you'll see that Steinhoff own them. They took over Benson's for beds, just lots and lots of different companies. I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but that's one of them.
And there's been allegations of child trafficking involved with the furniture, right?
Well, Wayfair there's been some allegations of, because they've been putting, I haven't really looked into the details of that, but they've been putting pieces of furniture on Wayfair for vast amounts of money. And evidently it's turned out to be the sale of children. Right. But we don't, 100% don't know that. But the interesting thing is that a lot of the furniture on Wayfair is Steinhoff furniture. If you go and have a look, it's all Steinhoff, wardrobe, Steinhoff table, So there's obviously some sort of a link there, to the furniture, not to the children, But when I looked at this senior governance officer and pulled my MP up about it, and I said, if there's no money to be made in children's services, and it isn't for profit and for money, they wouldn't have this man at the top of this, as one of the senior governance officers. He's finance and he's logistics expert. Right. So, if they were going to traffic children, he would be the perfect person to put at the top of an adoption agency. Sure. If it is an industry. Anyway, my MP was rather, he's got quite angry with me. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore, probably.
We're looking at here then a multi-agency where we've got the representatives in terms of politics with the MPs and the
yes.
the system.
And there's more. There's every region. Sorry to butt in,
not at all.
I didn't stop there. And every region has got somebody that is involved with this sort of energy, an energy man, a Green Party person. A worrying one was a head of an NHS children's looked after an adopted children's hub in a Sheffield hospital, Dr. Lorraine Pearson. A lot of people.
A note I've got here is Coast to Coast Adoption Agency 2019. Every region has one of these. So we got a corporate aspect tied in with the state agencies, right?
Yes.
These agencies are that purports, that says on the tin that they're to protect children and to look after, the welfare of the people, if you like. But it's all tied in with big money and these corporations. And we've got, you also mentioned with the chat with Simon, overseas social workers being brought in on proviso with a visa, so they can come over and live over here in the UK, and then they can get their visa. And you'd imagine the small print, the unwritten rule is that they do exactly as they're told, otherwise they're back out.
That's the problem. That is the big problem, because a lady contacted me not so long ago, and she said she pointed me to this article, and I'm going to have to find it again because it's quite a long time ago, where one young lady had tried to escape. She was a social worker, and she's tried to get back out of this system, and she was shot in a hotel room back in Africa. I think it was Nigeria. She was shot. And what I believe is happening, and you can imagine, I think some of these, they come over completely, I mean, they're coming from poor communities. Desperate. If you look at their social media, they're coming from very poor backgrounds and offered this wonderful life in England. And this is happening to white British social workers as well. They're totally, sucked into this system of removing children with rubber stamping, with copy and pasting, with lying, with, and I spoke to a lady at the BASW called, it was at CareTech. CareTech, I spoke to another lady, a couple of days ago, and she was South African, and she was called Faith. And I spoke to her about it all, and then I said to her, do you know that this is wrong? What's happening? And she said, well, I've come over from South Africa, and my parents are Christians, because I told her I was a Christian. And she said, and this is shocking to me, and I must report this. But she was obviously, she was on the phone, so she wasn't going to be the chief executive or something, Right. She said, I must report this. This is shocking. This is shocking. But I said, well, if you do report it, you may lose your job.
Well, this is the blackmail situation that's going on, right? That's quite an extreme version where they could even, get deported back to their third world country where they're, probably desperation stakes from. But we're seeing this again and again with the hospitals, with this whole COVID narrative thing that, the bullying and the hush money to shut people up from speaking the truth and going with their hearts and their morals and their ethics. Yeah. But an exciting thing is, listening to you, Jane, is that there are these groups, you talk about the parents in Barrow, and that this, if you like, resistance.
Yes. Yeah, resistance movement.
Coming together, that people are realizing that corresponding and pleading and applying to and petitioning these corrupt and duplicitous representatives is futile and not worth the paper it's printed on. So people seem now to be coming together and looking for alternatives as to how to battle is a fair enough word, I think.
Yes, through common law.